All right. Well, good evening, and apologize to those who are watching on our YouTube channel because it is 6:02, not 6 o'clock. My name is Scott Harden. I'm the mayor here in Wood Village. And before I introduce our evening and our panelists, I just want to acknowledge that we also have in the crowd tonight House District 49 State Legislator Zach Hudson, Wood Village City Councilor John Miner, Wood Village City Councilor Linnea Mend. And we also have Jenny Weber in the crowd tonight. She is a candidate for Fairview City Council in the coming election. And so tonight's forum is on safety and also on how we not get guns off necessarily, although we're going to talk about that. But how do we keep guns from getting to the street in the first place? So as elected officials, as law enforcement officers, we're asked, what are we doing about it? And this forum might be an attempt to sort of flip the script and say, what are you willing to do about it in order to safeguard your weapons and prevent them from being stolen? It will not be a debate about the Second Amendment. It is not a debate about characters of weapons that you would like to see made illegal. We're going to focus on the success that the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office has had getting guns off the street recently. And then, like I say, on that safe gun safety. And to do that tonight, we have our village chief, Lieutenant Ryan Hackla from the MCSO. We have Sergeant Gary Kirby from the MCSO. Sergeant Kirby is their gun dispossession officer, and you're going to learn about that tonight. We have Francis Kopp, the program manager from the MCSO, and Francis is in charge of things like issuing concealed weapons permits, for instance, and he's going to talk a little bit about that. And then we will have from Gun Owners for Responsible Gun Ownership, Tom O'Connor. His partner meant to be with him tonight, but had a family emergency. So Tom is on his own, and so hopefully you can give him some grace as he makes his presentation. And as you can see from your agenda, we're going to start with the current firearm laws and practices, concealed handgun licenses, and the gun dispossession unit with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. So take it away, Lieutenant Hackla.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for having me. Appreciate everybody coming out tonight. As the mayor said, my name is Ryan Hackla. I'm a lieutenant with the Sheriff's Office, and I also have the honor of serving as the chief of Wood Village. A little bit of stuff that the Sheriff's Office is doing for proactive policing to try to do our part to help reduce the gun violence that we're all aware of that's rampant within our communities. Back in April 24th to be exact, the Sheriff's Office initiated an enhanced public safety initiative. This initiative is focused on reducing gun violence and focusing on traffic safety. That was traffic safety deaths. This partnership was with Portland Police Bureau, Gresham Police Bureau, ATF, U.S. Marshal's Office, District Attorney's Office, and a number of others. And we couldn't do it without them. It was developed, as I said, to focus on doing what we can to reduce the gun violence that we're seeing in our community. There were 8 areas of focus that we focused on during this time. It went to July 3rd. It was gun dispossession. Sergeant Kirby next to me, he'll talk a little bit about that. Traffic safety, traffic fatalities that we were seeing. Our HOPE team, which is our homeless outreach and programs and engagement, as well as our transit police, partnership with the U.S. Marshal Service, our gun violence reduction missions, as well as community events and listening sessions. We didn't just go out and pick areas. We used data-based analysis to determine the areas where there is the highest concentration of reported incidences of gun violence in East County. We primarily focused on East County, east of 162nd. For the sake of the topics, I'll stick with the topics that are relevant to tonight's topic. So our gun dispossession unit. So our gun dispossession unit deals with domestic violence victims and removing firearms from households where an individual has been served a protection order against them by a petitioner. So during that process, the gun dispossession unit removed 45 firearms from households during that two and a half month time frame of the mission. We also dealt with, let me scroll down here. Our transit police did focus missions on MAX platforms and bus lines regarding violence that was occurring within our transit system. During that time, we had 19 arrests. We issued 24 exclusions, 8 citations, and issued 90 warnings. So we had a lot of interactions with folks on the transit system that goes throughout Multnomah County. We partnered with the U.S. Marshal Service as well as the District Attorney's Office, Department of Community Justice, DEA, District Attorney, the FBI. During their missions, they had removed 21 guns from the streets. They made 24 arrests, seized 1,500 rounds of ammunition, 3 pounds of methamphetamine, and 19 grams of heroin, and 449 pills of fentanyl. A lot of these are all intertwined, whether it's drugs and firearms and other crimes. They kind of all come together in one. They all correlate with each other. So getting the drugs off the street, the guns off the street, and the arrests made have a significant impact on the community. We also did some gun violence reduction missions. These missions were focused in the late hours of the night into the early morning. The focus was geared toward stolen vehicles that correlate with firearms and other people crimes that we see. During that time, we had conducted 217 traffic stops. We made 49 arrests. 76 charges were filed. We recovered 6 stolen vehicles. And another key stat that's kind of concerning is we had 18 eludes. An elude is when a vehicle, we initiate a traffic stop for legal reasons with our lights, and the car fails to yield and takes off at a high rate of speed. That's a danger to us, it's a danger to the community, and it's a danger to them themselves. A lot of those times we have our guiding policies on whether or not we pursued those or not. Those were not pursued, and were usually the danger to the community outweighed the reasons for us to pursue them. So 18 is a curious number because in my career, I would see maybe 2, 3 a year. And we had 18 in approximately 20 to 25 hours of missions. So it's the stats are up there, and that's concerning. Another area of focus that we had was community events and listening sessions. These are key because it gets us out into our communities to hear what the community is saying, answer their questions, hear what their concerns are, and then react to them and provide a service based on some of the concerns that you guys as communities are having. That's important to us as the Sheriff's Office because we can't do this alone. We rely on our partnership and we rely on our communities to report the crimes that they're seeing. And having the opportunity to get in front of literally thousands of people and interact with them throughout this process provided vital relationship building and information that allows us to take that and go forward with that. In total, during the EPSI mission, we had conducted a grand total of 309 traffic stops. This is with all the focuses that we had. We made 92 arrests. We seized 67 guns, issued 74 citations, had 123 warnings that were issued, and had a total of 19 eludes. One of those was on a traffic stop. I skipped over the traffic because it's not relevant to tonight's topic. So the proactive policing, these enhanced public safety missions that the Sheriff's Office has enacted, even though that the time that we have that, the gun violence reduction missions are continuing on a random basis to continue to prioritize reducing gun violence and what we're seeing out in our communities. For 2022, going back to January 1 through August, we don't have September stats yet. The Sheriff's Office has removed a total of 421 firearms from the street. Those vary from safekeeping, for destruction, found property, evidence during arrests and crimes. So it's encompassing of several different reasons for what it is, but it's a total of 421 guns that have been removed from the streets. So a lot of proactive policing. We're not, we have our own challenges with staffing and whatnot, but this is important to us. It's important to the Sheriff's Office, and it's important to the community. And that's why we're here. And that's why we're working with the community and doing what we can. So with that, I'll pass it off to Sergeant Gary Kirby, who can talk about the gun dispossession unit, what it does, why they're there, and the great work that they're doing.
All right. Thank you, Lieutenant. So my name is Sergeant Gary Kirby. And by the way, by the time I end tonight, if you have any questions, feel free to just come up and talk to me or ask me. A lot of information I'll share with you. But basically, I am part of the investigations unit. I call it more or less a satellite position, which means I'm not with the main hub detectives. I'm actually down at the Family Services Division, which is we share that building and investigations with the Portland Police Bureau, divert team. It's all the DV, you name it, everything's down there. And that's where we work. That's our main hub for us. I have one detective under my supervision, which is she is specific to DV cases and she investigates those. Gun dispossession is basically tied to court orders. And so court orders that require when a judge signs off on a court order, like say, for example, on a DV, a FAPA, what we call Family Abuse Protection Act order, there'll be a firearm prohibition attached to that court order. So we now, where we're standing now is that we basically are part of that system in place to investigate. And so I work hand in hand with the civil unit and we actually obtain the actual order. And then we actually go out and serve it. We actually interview the respondents who are being served the order. And within that order, there's a firearm compliance. Several factors involved. They have a 24, 48-hour period to release their guns to someone. And the criteria is they have options. And again, our purpose at that point is to get voluntary compliance from respondents. There's no crime being committed at that point. We're simply just serving them and then making sure, verifying that they're compliant with the order. And so the order is that if they're in possession of firearms, they have to come up with a plan on what they want to do with those guns. And so, it includes ammunition too, by the way. So they have options. They can give them to a third party. A third party could be a family member. It could be a friend. However, with a friend, there would have to be what they call a background check done on that third party. It's an ATF application that has to be filled out with a gun retailer to verify that they're legal to have and possess the guns. And this would be the third party. The other option is they can give the guns to us. They can surrender the guns to us voluntarily. We hang on to those guns during the course of the actual order. Generally speaking, most orders last about a year. They can be extended too, depending on what the petitioner in those orders request. But pretty much we hold on to them for safekeeping. We don't keep them permanently. We don't destroy them. We basically hang on to them and it's a storage area for those guns. And so since the program's been in place, and again, I mentioned earlier, if I haven't, we collaborate with the Portland Police Bureau. When I first got back to the unit towards the end of 2018, early 2019, there were two other detectives on the Portland detective unit that assisted me on the gun dispossession unit calls. Because of staffing issues and the continuing evolving of this program, they had to kind of take a back step on having those detectives available to me. So I was the sole investigator of most, if not all, of these gun dispossession cases. And so initially when I came back, we weren't part of the civil unit. That was one area that I corrected on that. I actually made a decision that it'd be much more efficient for us to be part of that unit because we're on the front end of actually getting those orders served and actually interviewing and verifying to see where and to track the guns that respondents may have. And so this program started back in 2014. So both agencies were both coincide working collaboratively together. And so just some numbers just to throw out to you. So when it first started and the first year that they actually started statistically getting numbers off the guns they were getting. And again, part of the process when we serve, there's what they call a declaration form that has to be signed, completed by the respondent. That's a declaration to state whether or not they have a gun. Or if they don't possess. So they have to mark this off. It's a court requirement. It's part of the documentation. And so we have them complete that, but we also verify to make sure they have guns or not. And we make sure that that's taken care of. And so with that being said, so back in 2016, we had 113 firearms. This is going back to 16. And then you'll see some numbers here going up and down a little bit, but then as this continued to evolve, you'll see the pattern of where you start seeing an increase in the number of firearms that we actually were recovering. So in 2016, 113, 2017, 23 firearms. And then in 2018, there were 74 firearms. And then when I basically came into the unit around that time, we started getting more statistical stuff on the affidavits and declarations that were being turned in to verify that they completed the process ordered by the courts. And so in 2019, there were 100 firearms, and then we had 48 affidavits. At the time, we were using affidavits to verify. Those were completed, 48. And then in 2020, we had 60 firearms and then 40 declarations completed. So as of 2020, my position actually was cut in the early stages of 2020. So from roughly February of 2020 to the end of April, I was no longer in this position. I was relocated and I was actually working in the patrol division due to budget constraints and that sort of thing. So it left it for Portland to kind of deal with how to enforce the GDU. And then in the early stages of May, the sheriff called me back to the position to work the cases. And so that's when I actually started really brainstorming to kind of come up with some better ideas on how we can capture and track these guns on respondents. And so that's when we teamed up basically with, towards the end of 2020, we teamed up with the civil unit. And so we actually were physically involved on the front end of this. And so the numbers for I already mentioned the 2020, but in 2021, there were 145 guns surrendered to us and then 244 declarations completed. And that was with me working the unit by myself. In this year, we received funding for two, I call it a hybrid position, but two civil deputies to actually assist me on some of my investigations. And so their responsibility is part civil unit, serving of ROs and that sort of thing, but not all move outs or, not all firearm ones. They're there to help the civil unit on their procedures and what they do, but they also help me 50% of the time on my investigations. And so they came into the unit in early January. I'm going to say January 17th actually was the official date that I got them. Two units, two deputies for that position. And so I was able to train them up. And since that time, so we started mid-January till now, our numbers are at, and just this is where we're at, this is a clear indication. We have 355 declarations completed. So declarations are set, each declaration is a separate case. It's specific to the respondent. So that's one respondent for each declaration that we've completed. And so there's been 355 completed. Out of that 355, we have right now, as we speak, as of today's date, we're at 215 guns surrendered to us. And as Lieutenant Hackler mentioned, we also assist in other areas too. We get calls. We actually have a hotline for respondents who need assistance in surrendering their firearms and that sort of thing. And so we do get calls. We get requests from citizens in the community to, they're not sure what to do with the disposal of their guns that they no longer want. And a lot of this is just, it's within the family a lot of times where there's a number of guns that they no longer want. And so we assist with actually the disposal or at least booking those guns for disposal down the road at the request of the owners. And I do ask people as to why they want the guns disposed of. And a lot of it is that the family no longer has a need for them, but they also tell me that they feel there's a safety risk or they don't feel comfortable or at peace giving the guns or selling the guns to somebody else privately. They would rather have them destroyed. And so we help with that too. And I have about, on my record, I have 130 guns that we've assisted on. In one case, I actually had 105 guns turned into our unit that we had booked for destruction. And so without us being in this position in the unit that we have, there's really nobody other than the Portland. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Portland took a back step on this because of their staffing. So nobody is verifying or tracking or recording any of this information. And so it's imperative that law enforcement has to be involved in this process because there's a timeline involved and nobody's checking the respondents to ensure they're compliant. The Multnomah County courts do not have what they call a gun declaration hearing, which in other counties that may be going on, but in Multnomah County, it's not. And so it requires our unit to be more due diligent on making sure we're on the front end of it to ensure that they're compliant. And again, the whole process is about voluntary compliance with gun owners. And then when there's a court order served to them. And if you have any questions, just let me know. I know I covered quite a bit there with you.
I do want to share a couple stats that show the importance of Sergeant Kirby's unit. Nearly 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience severe physical violence at the hands of their intimate partner at some point in their lifetime. Nearly half of all women murdered in the United States are killed by the current or former intimate partner, and more than half of those homicides that are done are committed with a firearm. So women are nearly 5 times more likely to be murdered by an abusive partner if that person has a firearm. So Sergeant Kirby and their unit are taking those firearms away. So they're directly impacting those statistics.
Before we get to our program manager, Francis Kopp from the Multnomah County Sheriff, I want to acknowledge that 2 more elected officials from the region have joined us. We have Metro Councilor Shirley Craddock, and we have Multnomah County Commissioner, position number 1, Sharon Marin.
And then next up, we'll have Francis Kopp. He is in charge of our concealed handgun license. He can speak a little bit as to how the Sheriff's Office handles the concealed handgun license process.
Thank you, Lieutenant. So my name is Francis Kopp. I manage the Law Enforcement Support Division, which does include our concealed handgun licensing unit. What I'm going to do in my time that I have here is I'm going to explain what a concealed handgun license is, what it does, how individuals obtain one, how long they're good for, and I'll give you some stats at the end, and I'm open for any questions when we're done. So concealed handgun license is a license that allows individuals to carry a firearm in Oregon concealed upon themselves or in their vehicle. Otherwise, Oregon is considered an open carry state, but there are specific ordinances in certain jurisdictions that do not allow individuals to open carry a firearm. A concealed handgun license obtained in Multnomah County is valid for all of Oregon. It's recognized by some other states. Ironically, it's not recognized by the state of Washington or the state of California. It is recognized by our neighboring states, Idaho and Montana. Because of that, we also issue to not only to residents of Multnomah County, we issue to residents of the state of Washington. There's a lot of residents in the state of Washington that travel to Oregon, either for work or vacation or whatever it might be. And so we do issue to the individuals of the state of Washington. One thing to note that Oregon is a shall issue state. And what that means is if individuals meet a particular criteria and they don't have any restrictions, the sheriff shall issue a concealed handgun license to residents of Oregon. We may issue to residents of Washington. So we have a little bit more ability to regulate who in the state of Washington shall have or may have a concealed handgun license and may not. The way individuals obtain a concealed handgun license is they submit an application and they pay a fee. And then they have to come in for fingerprints. They have to come in for a photograph, and then they go through a very rigorous background check. There's many different conditions that will prohibit somebody from having a concealed handgun license. Just a few of them: an individual that's convicted of a felony, they cannot have a concealed handgun license. Individuals with a misdemeanor conviction within the last 4 years, they'll also be denied a concealed handgun license. If somebody is on pretrial release for either a misdemeanor or a felony, or if they are wanted, if they have a warrant out for their arrest, they will be denied a concealed handgun license. You must be 21 years old to obtain one. And there's a few other prohibitions also in there as well, and I'm more than willing to go over that list in more detail if there's additional questions on that. The concealed handgun license is good for 4 years. Every 4 years, an individual must renew that concealed handgun license. And again, that exact same background check is done again. During any time while a person is in possession of a concealed handgun license, it can be revoked. That is also done by the sheriff's office. I'll give some numbers ahead of time right now. Just for example, this year, we've issued 1,795 concealed handgun license. Of those 1,795, we've revoked 3 people already of just the ones issued this year. And this year, we've also denied 69 CHL licenses. That means 69 individuals applied for a CHL license that didn't meet the requirement that is set by statute, and so they're denied. If you live in Oregon, people have the right to appeal our decision, and they do. And essentially, they take us to court to plead their case. This happens fairly regularly. Our attorneys will go ahead and file a brief with the court of why we are upholding our decision. And oftentimes after the plaintiff in this case reveals our brief, the application is withdrawn. When we do go to court, more often than not, the judge agrees with our decision to deny a CHL permit or license, excuse me. Also some interesting stats. In Multnomah County, we currently have about 40,000 concealed handgun license holders. That might sound like a lot, but let me point out a stat here. Clackamas County, which is much less populated than Multnomah County, they have 34,000 concealed handgun license holders. Washington County, another major county surrounding us, also much less densely populated, has 32,000. I really don't have a whole lot more unless there's some specific questions. I can tell you, there's about a dozen states across the United States that will honor an Oregon license. An Oregon license is not recognized in Washington. As I said, it's not recognized in California. Nor do we recognize those states' licenses. So an individual cannot get a Washington state license and carry their handgun concealed through Oregon and down into California. Oregon won't recognize it, nor will California. There are safe ways for them to transport a firearm in a vehicle that is legal, where the firearm is out of reach and it's separated from the ammunition, where they don't need a concealed handgun license for that. Unless there's anything else, that's all I have for right now.
Yes. Yeah. After all of the presentations will be made, we'll have a question and answer for as long as our scheduled time allows. And before I introduce Tom, I just want to mention that he brought with him some trigger locks. So after Q&A, if you have a weapon at home that you don't have a lock for, please feel free to come up and get one. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Tom O'Connor. Tom is with Gun Owners for Responsible Gun Ownership, and he is going to talk about, among other things, the safe storage.
All right. If I can make this work. So thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for inviting me. As said, my name's Tom O'Connor, and I'm with Gun Owners for Responsible Ownership. Ordinarily, we do this presentation as a team effort with my colleague, Paul Kemp. He unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, so hope you'll bear with me, and I'll try to cover Paul's piece of this as well. I'd like to talk a little bit about who we are at Gun Owners for Responsible Ownership and what we believe our role as gun owners can be in helping to reduce gun violence. So we are gun owners, outdoor enthusiasts, veterans, parents who seek reasonable and responsible solutions to preventing gun violence. Our commitment to reducing gun violence arose from the December 11th, 2012 shooting at the Clackamas Town Center, which some of you may be familiar with. The town center was a needless tragedy that occurred because a shooter had easy access to loaded and unlocked firearms that resulted in 3 deaths, one of whom was Paul Kemp's brother-in-law, 1 injury, and many folks running for their lives. They were all strangers to the shooter, but to us, they were neighbors, family, and friends. In the months after Town Center and Newtown, a small group of gun owners here in Oregon, survivors, some friends, began meeting together to explore ways that maybe we could help make a difference in the struggle to end gun violence. One thing we agreed upon right away was that as gun owners, we have an obligation to help lead to reduce gun violence. We believe that our Second Amendment rights come with responsibilities. We support common sense regulations to reduce gun violence and promote gun safety. We believe owning a gun should include a personal commitment to safe and responsible use of firearms. A firearm can be a useful tool for hunting, target shooting, and very rarely for personal protection. It is also a deadly weapon. It's not a toy. It's not a political statement. We believe there are common sense workable ways to reduce gun violence. One of those is safe storage. Is a statistic here that an estimated 26,000 children in Oregon live in a home with an unlocked firearm. Nationally, 89% of unintentional shooting deaths of children occur in the home. And most of those deaths occur when children play with a loaded gun in their parents' absence. 73 to 80% of school shooters obtained the guns from their home or the homes of relative or friends. Nearly half of those guns were not securely stored. So safe storage can also help prevent firearm theft. From 2005 to 2016, over 28,000 guns were reported stolen in Oregon. And during that same time period, over 1,600 were reported lost. And these firearms that are stolen often end up being used in crimes, as the sheriff's office mentioned. So if you are a new gun, how can safe storage help prevent firearm theft? A well-built metal lockbox or gun safe can deter theft. Also, write down the firearm serial numbers and keep them in a separate place so that an accurate report can be made to law enforcement. Before we get into the specifics of safe storage, let's review the basic rules of gun safety. First, always assume a firearm is loaded. 2, never point or aim at anything you do not intend to shoot. And 3, always store or secure your firearm when not in use. So what is safe firearm storage? When not in use, all guns should be kept unloaded and locked. Ammunition should be locked and stored separately. Don't share the lock combination with others. Store the keys, if you're using a key, in a key safe or other secure location. And very importantly, keep guns secured during transport. Guns in cars should be stored safely too. That's one of the most common places where firearms stolen is out of vehicles. So what are options for safe storage? A simple cable lock like the ones on the table there or trigger lock costs less than $10 and prevents the weapon from being fired. And many times you can get these at law enforcement, at city halls or police departments or sheriff's departments. And you can get them for free. We usually hand them out a lot at our presentations too. There's a wide variety of gun safes and lock boxes are available at major retail stores. If you're buying a safe, we recommend choosing one that's certified by the California Department of Justice. And most of the really good lock boxes and so on will say that on the box itself. So we'd like to talk a little bit about some commonly used firearm locking devices. There's a few here that, and we'll go through in specifically, but the first one there is a trigger lock. And the second one is another trigger lock, both of those on a semi-auto. The third example there is a cable lock on a semi-auto. And the fifth one there is a cable lock with a revolver. One of the nice things about cable locks is that it's clearly visible that the firearm is not only locked, but is unloaded as well. That's an advantage to a cable lock. So I can do this right. I'll give you a couple of examples of how these work. Can we?
About 12 seconds. So it's pretty quick. This is pretty sturdy. Some firearms when you buy them.
So, and here's an example of a cable lock with a handgun. So also want to talk a little bit about some of the lock boxes that are available in retail stores here in Oregon and around the country. The first one there is a keyed lock box. That's probably the simplest one. The second is a number code lockbox. If you've been in motel rooms, often the similar kind of thing that's in a motel room uses a simple 4 to 6-digit code to open it. The third is a biometric lockbox. Uses a similar mechanism like a lot of people have on your phone, recognizes a fingerprint that's been programmed into it. And all of these have a backup key for access. So demonstrate here a handgun safe. So a question we get asked a lot is, what if I keep a gun in my home for self-defense? And there's a myth, what we think is a myth, that safe storage means I can't access my gun in an emergency. In reality, safes and lockboxes using a simple 4-digit code or a biometric swipe of a finger are designed to be open in seconds. These safes are readily available in retail stores, many costing less than $100. You can and should always lock up your gun no matter what. Here's an example of using a biometric handgun safe.
Let me demonstrate.
Okay, and here's an example of using a digit-coded handgun safe.
So it's another slide. Has a nice light inside, so.
Okay, and as I mentioned, it's our belief that as gun owners, we have a real responsibility to store and secure our firearms, to keep them out of the hands of kids, and to try to help ensure that they aren't stolen and get used in crimes. That's, I think, a basic responsibility that we think that we all have, and not leave everything to law enforcement. Beyond that, now in Oregon, safe storage is the law. In the 2021 legislature, Senate Bill 554 was passed, effective in September of last year. It requires the owner of a firearm to secure it with a cable or trigger lock, a locked container, or in a gun room, unless the firearm is being carried or under their direct control. Failure to secure is a Class C violation. It's a Class A violation if a minor gets access. And importantly, if an unsecured firearm is used to injure persons or property, the owner is presumed negligent and subject to damages in court action. Additionally, gun owners must report a theft of a firearm within 72 hours of knowing a theft or loss has occurred. Failure to report the theft is a Class B violation And if the firearm is used to injure persons or property, the owner is presumed negligent in a court action for damages. Additionally, a person who transfers a firearm to a minor must directly supervise the use of the firearm. Failure to directly supervise a minor constitutes presumed negligence in a court action for damages. What else do we need to know? First of all, no lock is completely foolproof. Gives special thought to children in the home. A cable lock like these here may be enough to protect a toddler, but a combination safe is a far better choice in a home with teens. And if anyone in the home is suicidal, locks are not enough. All firearms should be removed from the home. Another important thing is that when children, we suggest, and something that many of the moms organizations work on, when children are visiting friends or family, ask, are there firearms in the home? Are they locked up? Are they safely stored? A really important way that we can all help prevent child harm. So that's our presentation tonight, and was helpful. We do have a website and with other information on it if you're interested. Thank you.
Greg, did you have anyone watching on the YouTube channel?
We've bounced between about 4 to 6, and at the moment, no questions yet, but there's a bit of a lag. So we'll go ahead and do the audience ones first, and we'll see if some things pop up.
There we are. Does anyone in the audience have a question that you would like to ask any of our panelists? Councilor Shirley Craddock.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed the presentation. So a question you may have answered that I maybe missed, but Sergeant Kirby, so most of the guns that you take off the street, is that primarily due to because someone's been involved with domestic violence? Or what are the other reasons that you might be taking guns off the street? What other actions would you get involved when you have to remove a gun from a household?
So for the first question, yeah, so it would be a court order that stems from, you can have a regular domestic violence situation where they actually will go down and apply for a restraining order. But anyone could actually file a restraining order on somebody. So it's just not tied just to the domestic violence part of it. So my unit is specific to those court orders once they've been granted and they're in effect, and we need to actually go out and enforce it. On the other question, if I understood you right, it's more about what other areas would we be getting guns? There's a lot of areas that we can look at. It could just be calls that we get, and maybe Lieutenant could add more to this, but we may get a call of a disturbance where maybe there's already guns present. Perhaps we make contact with people who maybe should not be possessing firearms, and that would be another area that we would be investigating, and they would be arrested or charged for that. And if there's anything else, Lieutenant, that you think you might.
Yeah, there's been times where somebody has inherited a gun collection and they don't feel as comfortable with the guns as maybe the person that bequeathed them to them. We also have our drug unit. Back in August of 2021, it was all over the news. We had a drug bust where there was 350 firearms, I believe, that were seized. A couple of them looked like, I don't know, a lot, machine guns like from World War II that would be very bad on the street. So lots of different ways we come upon these. Just find some in the streets in a bush. All kinds of different ways.
Questions? Jenny?
I'm just wondering, first of all, thank you. This was really informative for taking the time to be in the community. My question is, what kind of partnerships do you have with other organizations outside of law enforcement to identify potential situations or maybe have a concealed carry handgun? You know what I'm trying to say? Concealed handgun permit to identify if they may need to have that revoked. And I'm thinking specifically about like DHS for child welfare, as well as behavioral health. As a behavioral health clinician, I'm wondering if there's partnership with local hospitals for like mental health holds, Oregon State Hospital, Unity. So just wondering if there's, and if there's not, there's deficits that could be brought to attention to be addressed.
I'll go ahead and start with the concealed handgun license one. So a part that I didn't discuss is that when an individual obtains their concealed handgun license, the record of that license being issued goes into our law enforcement data system. That's a system that is statewide. What's really nice about that system is if somebody does get arrested, wherever they are in Oregon, we automatically are notified. Because just being arrested on a new crime will automatically cause that license to be revoked. And also that information being in the system, if there is another law enforcement partner that is being involved with somebody that maybe they aren't arresting, but they feel that that person might be a danger to themselves and others, which is one of the reasons to either deny or revoke, they will know that that individual has a license through us when they run their record, and then they will contact us and notify us of the situation. We'll do an investigation and make a determination whether or not it meets the grounds for a denial or a revocation. As far as the other partnerships, I think I'm going to defer to the sergeant here because he has quite a few other partnerships that he works with.
For me, what comes to mind with gun dispossession is we are in direct relationship partnerships with family services. So that includes advocates. It includes DHS too. It can behavioral health. Portland has their own BHU unit, which is a group of law enforcement that goes out and actually handles the mental health cases that they deal with. So, but one thing that comes to mind for me when I think of gun dispossession are petitioners. They could be likely the victims of a domestic violence. They're the ones filing the application for it. So they are our first resource for us. And they in turn give us information about when we're looking for somebody or trying to verify if they actually have a gun. A lot of times these are relationships that are through marriage and other areas. And so they have information for us to give us about the respondent. And so without that, it makes it very challenging for us to actually figure things out and determine things. So that's the first thing that comes to mind to me though. But the victim advocates play such a vital role in what we do in our investigations, not only just for gun dispossession, but domestic violence and a violation of restraining orders too. So that's in a nutshell, basically for what I do.
Yeah, and also with Portland's BHU, it's not just law enforcement. They also have clinicians, mental health workers that work with that unit. So
Partnerships are really an important part of what we've been trying to do too. We've been working with the medical community. We do presentations similar to what I did tonight with pediatricians and other folks in the medical community, particularly focused on child access prevention. We donate and do training with folks in the Multnomah County medical community and also with Dornbecker Children's Hospital. We've worked with them to provide gun locks and some safes as well. And Multnomah County has a healthy birth initiative program where they work with new parents on all kinds of safety issues, swimming pools, traffic, you name it, but also firearms. And so there's an opportunity to work to partner there that is really important. Hopefully, there's going to be more of it. That's going to be.
For the, substitutes and my question, is, that
So maybe I can take a crack at part of that. In the legislature in 2021, along with the safe storage bill, there was another part of that bill focused on giving local school boards the authority to restrict handguns or firearms, excuse me, on school grounds. And that included folks with concealed handgun permits as well. So those decisions can be made by the local school board. And I couldn't tell you which ones in the area have done that, but that authority was given that.
Yeah, Reynolds School District and Portland Public Schools prohibit firearms even with a CHL. So technically a CHL does allow you to carry a firearm onto a campus, but as he was saying, each school board can restrict and prohibit that. So Reynolds School District and Portland Public Schools do not allow firearms, even with the CHL.
Absolutely. That is one of the prohibitors. It depends on what type of documented history it is too. The statute is very clear on which documented history of mental health issues we're allowed to deny on.
can you open carry?
Yes, you can. It actually is an open carry state. So, in Multnomah County, if you do not have a concealed handgun license, you can open carry an unloaded firearm. If you have a CHL, you can open carry a loaded firearm.
There are several situations
Yeah, and we can't say if you do this, then this will happen to you. If you don't do this, that won't happen to you. It's a case by case situation based on how you're feeling and what you feel you need to do to ensure your safety. It's a vague answer, but we can't really say you can do this or you can't do that. In regards to the hold times, that's a concern. Obviously we would want a 911 call go directly to an operator that can, or a dispatcher that can enter the call immediately. Sometimes there are delays. So, with a delay, the potential that delays a police response in case of an emergency. So there could be some implications for that. Is there an increase of it? I really can't say. I don't know. I don't know what it was beforehand. We're aware of some delays that the BOEX system is going through, and that's something that they would have to speak to. But like I said, in the perfect world, there would be no delays. So sorry, I can't really answer your question that great because it's not one that I can really give you.
I can answer for concealed carry, actually can answer for both. Condition of PTSD would not be disqualifier for either one, unless ordered by a judge of the person that is mentally incapable to either care for themselves or a danger to others as a result of that PTSD. If that was the case, then yeah, gun ownership and potentially a concealed handgun license would not be available for that person. But there would have to be a medical diagnosis and a judge making a decision of somebody not being able to care for themselves and a threat to others. That's correct.
Very much for the question and for your service and your vulnerability there. That was very courageous. Thank you. Next, we have a question from our Natural Leaders Group.
My name is Graciela. It's the first time I stay here. I need an interpreter because I get a little nervous for speak fine English. But my question is,
So the question is, after you do a background check on someone asking to get a license, how long is there a wait before they can get that arm, they get that firearm?
I'll speak to the concealed handgun
For a
license.
firearm, not for the license. My apologies for the fire.
For a firearm? I'll let Ryan.
Yeah, so the firearm, so when you purchase a firearm, you have to get a background. And the background, they had up to 3 days is what the goal is. So technically, after 3 days, if your background is not completed, the seller can issue you the firearm before your background is completed. It's up to the seller. So it doesn't mean they shall, it means they may. So the business, the person, the gun show, wherever you're getting the firearm from, they may choose not to issue you the firearm until after your background is completed. Currently, the state has approximately 3,600 backlogged backgrounds right now. So that means there's 3,600 approximate people that have purchased a firearm that are waiting for their background to be completed so that they can take possession of their firearm that they're purchasing.
That was my question. Thank you.
thank you for answer. So my name is Teresa Campos Dominguez. I am a member of the Wood Village community. And you mentioned about partnership. And I wanted to remind you, the community has already a lot of partnership going on. We developed this partnership with the police officer for 10 years. We see them in the posadas and the event that the Mexican community wanted them to see it in order to build trust. When we build trust, we had 2 cases when the ladies find their firearm and one other arm. And in 2 cases, when I had to reach the officer and say, what can we do? The lady is giving me the fire. They were very the firearm from the house, from the community. So some, even they didn't ask much about it because now our children, they know where they are, who has it, and who is in the backpack, but they don't want it to talk. But we are partnership also. Don't forget, it's not just system, communities we had.
That's a great point too. Thank you for saying that. The community is probably one of the bigger partnerships that we would have. It's important that we work together and that we help educate each other. We've dealt with a community of individuals that came over to the United States that aren't really, they didn't understand or they didn't know certain traits that might show that their children are involved in, criminal enterprise, if you will. So they didn't know what to do. They just thought that, oh, that's normal. And so it's getting out, getting that face time, being present, being involved with the community to where we can help educate them and to like, hey, this might be something you need to be concerned about. And vice versa. The community can also help educate us on stuff that the community is seeing because we don't see everything. As I had said earlier, is like we can't do this alone. It takes all of us, and it truly does take all of us. And it takes those relationships like Las Posadas, which is a great time. I've been to a few of those now. All those opportunities that we have, and when you're talking about what else are we doing, this, and Councilor Minor, I know this is our first one we've done, first of many apparently that's coming up. So, but it's a good thing, right? It's all about just getting out there, getting heard, and helping educate each other. So, thank you for saying that. Excellent.
So ideally, the ammunition should be locked separate from the firearm. Recognizing that there are folks who feel that they need quick access to a firearm for self-defense. That's not always going to happen. And in that case, the most important thing is to have a good lockbox where you can store both at the same time. Ideally, it's best to keep them separate. And it may also depend on your home situation. Do you have toddlers? Do you have teenagers? The different circumstances would dictate different solutions, but the most important thing is to have some kind of a secure device to keep those weapons out of the hands of somebody that shouldn't have.
And Counselor Amon, just to kind of go off of that, one of the things that often isn't mentioned, which I'm glad he mentioned in his presentation, is gun violence also includes suicide, right? So by keeping our firearms safe, secure, and out of the hands of those that want to do harm to themselves, that is thus preventing, gun violence. Now, that being said, a person that is determined to harm themselves can really overcome a lot of barriers to accomplish that. So by having the ammunition stored elsewhere in a different location, that's just one extra barrier that might deter that individual or have them think like maybe not today. And that might be able to give us that extra time to get them the help they need.
Commissioner, did you have your hand up earlier? I wasn't sure. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Anyone else? Question this evening? Representative Hudson?
Where do the guns that end up being used in crimes or that you seize, where do they originate? Person-to-person sales, thefts, trafficking, where are they coming from?
All of the above. So unfortunately, Detective Chris Stevens, who's a member of our Metro Safe Streets Task Force, had a last minute thing that we had to pull away. He's the expert on this. But it's a wide range that they're seeing right now, pretty evenly increased. We are seeing an increase in ghost guns. Ghost guns are guns that are built or made privately, not by an actual gun manufacturer with serial numbers that's traceable. So it's a ghost gun. It's untraceable. So we're seeing an increase of those. We are actually seeing a significant portion of straw purchases. So a straw purchase would be I don't qualify. I won't pass a background. So I have my wife who will, or so they go and purchase it through legal means and then they give it to me. So we're seeing a lot of those. We see a lot of guns coming from burglaries. Someone has a gun collection and they get burglarized and they have all their guns stolen. The other things is stolen guns will often stay in our community, but they also travel across the states. So we've recovered stolen guns that have been stolen out of Utah, 10 years prior. So they do make their way because they don't stay in one person's hands often. Within criminal groups, a lot of times a gun will be used to commit a crime. And then they give it to another person that wasn't there at that crime. So they don't have the specific details about the incident, but they keep it within their group. So it doesn't really get far, but then that person commits a crime. So it goes to another person. So it's changing hands quite a bit. But we're kind of seeing all of the above, stolen guns, ghost guns, legally purchased guns. It's a wide swath of what we're seeing out there.
To be loud.
Hello? Okay. Thank you so much. This is such an amazing presentation. My question is, and you may have addressed this, I got here a little late, so I'm sorry, but where do guns go once they are, if you confiscate guns through any of these methods, what happens to them?
So if it's involved in a crime, once the case has been adjudicated, then they'll be melted and destroyed. Yeah, well, that, but
Correct.
yeah, once it's all said and done, they're destroyed. I don't have the numbers of what we destroy, but we do a few hundred a year is my from my time in logistics. We do melt them annually.
A few.
Yeah.
And that was a great question. It's one I had asked before because in my personal professional experience, I spent 20 years in sporting goods and have
Some of the guns that are seized for crimes, we do have to keep for quite a long time to get through the case beyond statute of limitations and any potential appeals. So some of them we have to maintain for quite a while before they can actually be destroyed.
I actually, so when we get new firearms, I actually really don't know what we do with our old ones, to be honest with you. I'll have to get back to you on that. Yeah. Well, you can, legally, you can sell a gun. I mean, I can sell a gun to you, but a background has to be completed. There's nothing that prevents firearms from being transferred. That might be different, right? Because then after the crime and the case has been adjudicated, the sheriff's office will destroy it. It'll be melted. But I can go to a gun store and purchase a gun legally, and then a month later decide I don't want it, and then go and sell it to a stranger. That needs to be, by law, a background has to be completed. So there's nothing that prevents, our firearms, there's nothing that prevents our firearms from going from one person to another, as long as it follows the legal channels.
Or I guess for everybody, but what do you suggest? Done is best.
Good question. So this is my personal opinion. The first thing I do would be to think about, why do you want to own a firearm? And for what purpose? Because that can dictate, that obviously can dictate the type of firearm that you would want to buy, how you can use it legally. And so if you want to use it for hunting, you'd want to take you'd want to take a hunter safety course, and you'd want to go through some training. There are specific rules around what weapons you can use for hunting. For example, if you're going to be a duck hunter, the shotgun can only hold 3 shells. Deer hunting, so on, it's 5 in Oregon. So there's some rules around that. That can also dictate how you're going to store it. If you want to use it for target shooting, again, there's some, specific things that you may want to look at. For self-defense, if you, again, you want to think about, do you, in your home, are you living alone? Are you married? Do you have kids? Do you have other kids that come over? All those things play into, I think, the decision about whether to purchase a firearm in the first place, and then secondly, about what kind of training you'll want to get. We believe very strongly that everyone who purchases a firearm should go through a training experience. There are a number of online courses that are available. ODFW has some great online courses. They not only just for hunters, they cover all kinds of gun safety programs. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, various organizations, gun ranges have courses I know that you can take that include live fire drills, the whole range of things. But above all, I think at least in my mind, the 2 most important things are really think about, why do I want this? And all kinds of legitimate reasons, but what do I want to use it for? And then 2, the really important to be trained and know how to use it, because even and this folks from law enforcement can tell you how important training is to anyone.
In the state of Oregon, you can actually get a CHL issued to you with never even touching a gun. So you can take an online course and get certified on it, and then you can go to a gun broker and purchase a gun. And the first time you ever hold a gun is when you get issued it. So then you put it in your purse or wherever you carry it at, and then you go into a store, having be the first time you've ever carried a gun. So to piggyback what he's saying, I would recommend you spend some time maybe at a gun range before you go through the process. Definitely learn the laws and definitely learn the responsibility that you're putting on yourself to go through that process. But when you are carrying a firearm, everywhere you go, there's a firearm at that scene, right? We as law enforcement, we deal with that also. And there's a level of responsibility that comes with that. And it's important that when you accept that responsibility, you know what responsibility you're accepting and that you are trained, right? Get familiar with shooting a firearm and understanding it, because it is kind of a complicated tool. There's a process to handling it. So.
Really good.
Thank you for that. So look for that on your ballot. And I think that we have scheduled to be here tonight until about 7:30. It's 7:27 now, and I don't see any more questions. So please, if you have at home that's not locked up and what you heard tonight compels you to lock it, you can grab a lock for free. I'm going to grab home. It's not loaded. It's in a case, but I'm going to put the cable lock on it. So I'm going to take one with me. And so I bought it because Charlotte wanted to have something in the home after there had been 2 break-ins where we live at Tree Hill, and she wanted something that she could shoot with little training. And so that's why we went shotgun.
And I'm happy to stick around for another 15, 30 minutes if anyone has any other questions that they feel more comfortable talking in private on.